Dr. Abadi, welcome.
Thank you.
Today we're looking at a series of interviews with experts in the field of global governance, international economics and agricultural economics, other things that are germane to the future and sustainability of the planet. And we're hoping to translate that back into some ways that we might think about organisational change and institutional transformation at a very practical level that businesses and governments and so on can engage with down the track. So starting with that bigger picture with an economist like yourself, how can we make the planet work for the welfare of all humanity, not just now but for future generations?
Well, to answer that question from a global perspective, you have to ask the first answer a more fundamental or essential question of nobility of mankind. Do we believe all mankind are noble and all mankind are one in terms of there not being a fundamental difference between colours, creeds, people of different religion or ethnicity? If we believe that the answer is affirmative in the sense that there is no difference between people and they're all noble, then they must all share the resources of this one limited planet in such a way that is equitable and is commensurate to their efforts, and they're in such a way that they all can share in the ecosystem services that are provided, ecosystems that provide us with our food and shelter and take away our waste and process our waste, and in such a way that is just and equitable for all peoples of the world, rather than just a limited few, or people who are able to, let's say, corner the market or corner these resources.
So, whilst that's becoming, I guess, a more urgent imperative, globally, how do we get past traditional notions of GDP and the measurements which are defining things somewhat differently from that and prioritising things somewhat differently, the economic imperative, the growth imperative and so on?
Yes, the notion of GDP as an indicator of the performance of an economy begs the question of what does it mean when there is positive change in GDP and therefore growth in the economy. What is growth for? I think the notion of purpose of things is very important. What is the purpose of growth in an economy? And if the purpose of growth is to bring the welfare of humanity from a lower base to a higher level, the welfare of the citizens of not just one nation, but all nations preferably, up to a higher standard, so that we can have an ever-advancing civilization, then that notion of GDP then has to go beyond just looking at what is being traded, the stock and trade of an economy, and ask the question, is it causing prosperity in a holistic sense? Is it causing lower infant mortality? Is it increasing life expectancy of people? Are they living more well during their adult life? Are they able to enjoy leisure and community activities that causes cohesion in the community, causes peace and harmony and accord, so there's no fighting and dissension and strife? If that is what we mean by growth, then that's a good thing. But does GDP measure that? GDP is a convenient measure that economists use, but it's not everything. And so then it requires us to think, what does growth mean and what's its purpose?
And presumably a new set of metrics to sort of redefine purposeful growth, if we want to call it that.
Yes, in Tim Jackson's book on prosperity and growth talks about those things, and there are many other authors that have published in this space. For instance, you can see that when the GDP of a country reaches, say, $5,000 to $10,000 of GDP per capita, then people tend to achieve near maximum levels achievable for that time and space for their welfare in terms of, like I said, infant mortality or life expectancy or education level that enables them to render service to their community and earn a decent living so they can have what you would call a dignified life, a life without oppression and all of that. Now, when a country reaches that and they've got laws and institutions that protect those laws, say, for individuals' rights and property rights and human rights, the rights to practice their religion and so on, you only need $5,000 to $10,000 worth of GDP per capita to do that. Then suddenly you get these diminishing marginal returns to, say, adult life expectancy, and the graph is very sharp. It rises very sharply from 0 to 10,000 and then plateaus out to 50, 60,000. So that meaning for extra $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 worth of extra income per person, you don't get a lot more of those essential welfare improving things in a country.
Are relatively, in terms of redistribution of wealth, if $10,000 was the baseline, we would get significant impact.
And you see examples, numerous examples around the world where countries have achieved this. And the thing is that when you do have policies and institutional arrangements that bring about those positive changes for those small sums, it means that you don't need to have your citizens start believing in the pursuit of these extreme levels of materialistic, opulent living. If it requires education, particularly moral, ethical, and spiritual education, that enables the people living in a country to realize that chasing those material possessions that you would call opulent living doesn't actually bring about the betterment of the whole community. So it's about helping citizens understand the common weal, the best welfare of all of the citizens living, not just in your own country, but around the world. But that requires us to think globally and then act locally.
Amir, if you were presented with the opportunity to make one change in organisational or institutional structures that you're familiar with to reflect some of these broader principles that you've outlined earlier, what would that be?
I would create an environment in which people's intellectual endeavours, people's physical endeavours towards achieving, towards achieving financial reward for their welfare, also harmonizes with those commonly and universally held beliefs that are commonly called spiritual beliefs. I'm talking ethical and standards. I'm talking values that are deeply held, heartfelt beliefs that I ought to do things that are not just for my own welfare, but improve the welfare of others. And it's only when we start thinking unselfishly in work environments, in our social interactions, and think about the common weal again, that people start interacting in a collaborative way. People start sharing things. People don't want to corner everything for themselves and under selfish desire. But you can create systems in work environments which causes people to act selfishly, and I think that is toxic in work environments. And so wherever we work, it would be nice if arrangements were made for us to harmonize our intellectual and physical endeavors with our spiritual health beliefs. And most people in the main want to do good.
So that's interesting, because at that organisational institutional level, not only do we, and at the higher level, not only do we have to change the metrics that define prosperity and growth in different terms, but also performance management systems and reward systems.
That's right.
And supporting cultures that enable a more purposeful set of collaborative and ethical values to emerge in the organisation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.